Hey, it's Patrick, and I'm going to show you how to upgrade the front suspension on your Harley Davidson bagger. And how we're going to do that is we're going to use some cartridge kits from Öhlins. Specifically, the one we're using is the FKS 231. Now, this installation is going to be very similar for all late model baggers using these Öhlins cartridge kits. So let's say from 2014 and up, the Rushmore models, this is an M8 Road King. This is all going to be very, very similar. As you can see, I've taken the nacelle off here to get to the triple clamps. If you have a Road Glide or a Street Glide, that's going to be a little bit different. You just have to be able to get to these clamps. We have a couple videos out there showing you how to get the fairings off of a Street Glide or a Road Glide. If you need some help with that to get you to this point, go ahead and check those out. Now, this can be done in your garage with hand tools, and basically you just need to be able to get the front wheel off the bike because obviously you have to get to the fork legs. So I have ours braced up with a couple of flat jacks on our lift. You can do this on the garage floor. It'll be a little more difficult, but still totally doable. All the tools we're going to use, we're going to leave in the description down below. In my opinion, this is one of the best bang for buck mods you can do to a Harley touring bike. Most people neglect this and just do shocks on the back because they're worried about this install on the front. It's really not that hard, and it is totally worth it. The first thing we have to do is get this front fender off so we can get our wheel off. So let's get to work. So we're going to take our front fender off and our brake calipers off. It's a 1/4 inch Allen to get the front fender off. Once you get clear of that, you can use a 12.10 millimeter to get your brake calipers off. Just don't let the brake calipers hang under their own weight. Prop them up somehow, use a bungee cord or a zip tie or something, just so there's not pressure on the brake lines. After that, we can get that front wheel off. So now to take our front wheel off, we're going to take a 15/16. We're going to break our axle nut loose. You can go ahead and take it all the way off. But you want to do that before you loosen the pinch bolt up on this side, which is a 6 millimeter Allen. Once we have both of those off, we can pull the axle out. You may have to raise your bike up or down a little bit, take the load off of it to get the axle out nice and clean. Now I have access to our fork legs. We need to drop these out of here. We're gonna work one side at a time. The way this cartridge kit is set up, one side's compression and one side's rebound. We're just gonna do them one at a time. We need to get this little air dam out of here because we need to get to our bottom triple clamp screws. So this is a 1/4 inch Allen, one on each side. We'll pull the air dam out. That'll leave our other 2 triple clamp screws, one on the top, one on the bottom. We're just gonna need to loosen those up. We don't need to take those all the way out. I'm gonna slide this down halfway. The reason I'm only taking it down halfway is I'm gonna take a 3/4 Allen, and while this is tight in here and I can get to it, I'm gonna break this top cap loose. So later on when I'm working on this, it's not so hard to break loose. If you don't have like a bench or something to work on, you can use this bottom triple clamp to hold this to do some of this work. For us, we're gonna take it over. I got a fancy Jim's tool that's gonna hold onto this fork leg while we do some work. So depending on where you're working, you may run into what I'm running into here. I'm not gonna be able to get this tube out because my lift is in the way with this cowbell on here. So I'm gonna take a 5/16. There's a bolt in the front and the back, and it'll take this loose, and I should be able to drop this out without having to clear this whole cowbell. You don't necessarily have to take those off. Actually, it looks like on my other side, I might be able to slide that completely free without taking the cowbell off. But if you're jammed up, you can get to the cowbell and take it all off. Just let that slide down. I'm gonna loosen that bottom triple clamp bolt and take the whole leg off. So these tools are pretty handy. I'll put this in the description with the rest of the hand tools. You don't need this tool, but it is very handy to hold a fork leg. So now we're gonna take our top cap off with our 3/4 Allen. When you do this, know this is under spring pressure. And I'm pressing down with my hand that has the rag over it. There we go. So it's fine thread. You see there's not a ton of them. So when you start seeing threads, stuff's about to happen. Once we take the cap off, there's gonna be a spacer in here, a washer, and the mainspring. So now we're gonna get a drain pan. I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna turn the fork leg over and just kind of work it back and forth just a little bit, just to let the oil drain out. Give it a minute to drain. There's probably more in here than what you think. And the next thing we're gonna do is pull the bolt out of the bottom. So the more oil we can get out of here, the less is gonna run out on us later. Now we're gonna run it back up to the clamp to get us back in a better spot to work on this. So now we need to get the dampening rod out of here, and it's being held in by an Allen screw that runs in through the bottom here. Now you're gonna need a 12 millimeter Allen, a long one, to get up in there. Sometimes if you hit these real quick with an impact, they'll come loose. What you may have to do is slide the spring and the spacer back in there to hold pressure down to get that screw to come loose. Oh. So pro tip, make sure you put your oil pan down before you pull the screw out. So now that the bolt's out, we can take the damping rod out of there. We're just gonna dump it out. We are gonna reuse this spring, but we're not gonna reuse the damping rod. So now our fork leg's all cleaned up. Everything is out of there except for that oil lock sleeve or that cup that's in the bottom of this fork leg. We're gonna leave that in there. Make sure that's nice and seated in there. One way to keep that from moving is to keep this fork compressed. Okay, so now we're gonna put our cartridge in. This kit comes with 2 cartridges. One is compression, one is rebound. Install the rebound on the right side, rebound R, that's easy enough to remember. Install the compression, which we're doing, on the left side. If you've taken the caps off already, one way to tell what's what, the compression side has the bleed holes at the top of this tube, and the rebound will have the bleed holes at the bottom. So what we're going to do right now is we're gonna take the cap off, we're gonna install our pull-up tool, which is that aluminum rod. We'll thread that onto here, and then we're going to install this cartridge. But before we do that, this kit has the option to run this 1-inch lowered. This bike is getting that 1-inch lowered set up, so we're gonna take our spacer, we're gonna drop it down in there, and then our stock top-out spring, we're gonna drop on top of that before we slide our cartridge kit in there. We're gonna take our cap off, should spin right off, and then we're gonna install our tool. And that's just gonna allow us to keep a hold of this while we're working on it. Once we slide that cartridge kit in there, we're going to put a new bolt and washer on through the bottom here with our 12mm Allen. We're gonna torque that between 30 and 37 pounds. You can reuse those screws. I have new ones, but make sure you replace those copper washers. Okay, so now we have to add our fluid to this fork leg. And to do that, we have to set what's called our air gap. And what that is the dimension from the top of this tube to the top of the fluid when this is fully compressed. Now, they make a fancy suspension tool to do that. You're probably not gonna have one of those. So what I do is I take a set of calipers and I set this at 140 millimeters because that's what our air gap is going to be. We're gonna add some fluid in here up to maybe here. Then we'll work this slider up and down to work all the air out of it and work all of the fluid through it. Same thing with our cartridge kit. We're gonna pump it until it's nice and smooth and you can feel no air moving in there. Then little by little, we're gonna add fluid until we hit our measurement. If there's more oil over this here, you know you've gone past 140 millimeters, you can dump a little bit out. But this is how we're getting that air gap measurement. So now we're gonna install our spring. This kit comes with 2 springs. There's a chart on the back of the instructions that will direct you to which spring you need for your body weight. For our rider's body weight, we're using the heavier spring. Now, we're gonna drop this spring in here. There's a mark on the end of the spring. There's basically a part number etched in there. You want that to go up. After that, we're gonna drop in our guide ring. Now we're using the lowering kit, the spacer at the bottom, so we're using this narrower guide ring, and we're also not using the preload spacer. So if you're not using the lowering kit, you're gonna use the other thicker guide ring and the preload spacer. We're not doing that. So we're gonna drop our spring in, letters up, we're gonna put our guide ring on there. We're gonna take our other tool that came with the kit, and we're gonna slide it in there so it holds all of this up with the spring installed, and that'll get us to putting our top cap on. So now we're going to install our top cap. It comes with an O-ring in the kit. You're gonna wanna put that O-ring on the cap. We're gonna throw a little bit of grease on it to make sure it seats down nice without getting torn. We're gonna spin the cap down on here. This is a 13mm nut here. When this bottoms out, we're gonna bring that nut up to meet it and tighten it up. So if you have a socket, you can drop it on there, hold it with a 13mm wrench, and 12 Newton meters is the spec they give for torque, which is about 9 foot-pounds. So once that's done, we can pull our tool out and we can push this cap down there, bring the tube up and tighten this up. And this cap is a 41mm and it gets tightened to 10 Newton meters. I don't have a 41mm socket, so we're kind of gonna wing that. The other thing to know is when you're putting both caps on, you have on the top here, you have your adjustment for compression. On the other one's obviously gonna be rebound. That's a 3mm Allen. They want those all the way back to off when you tighten this up. So we're gonna pull our tool out of here after we get our cap on and get this thing all buttoned up. We're just about ready to put the fork leg back onto the motorcycle. Before we do that, we need to set our preload and our compression because it's gonna be underneath the handlebar on the bike and tough to get to. If you look in the instructions, it'll give you the recommended settings for your rider weight. After we get that set, we're gonna slide this back on the triple clamp. Now you know why they call it a cowbell. We're going to torque the top and the bottom bolt. So there's only one bolt in the top triple clamp, and there's 2 bolts in the bottom. We're gonna do the bottom bolt there, 14 to 18 foot-pounds. Also, when you set this in that top triple clamp, make sure you leave about a 3/16 gap from the top to the top of the triple clamp. That's a factory setting. So now I'm gonna reattach our cowbell with a 5/16 socket. And then everything that we just did to this left side, this compression side, we're now gonna do to the right side, the rebound side. You're gonna repeat all those steps over again. Nerve-wracking. It's like a jack in the box. Woo! Garbage. Perfect. Look at that. So now that our fork legs are back on, all we have to do is put in our air dam, which is held in by our 2 pinch bolts on our bottom tree. We're gonna torque those 14 to 18 foot-pounds. We're gonna put our front wheel back on. The axle nut gets torqued to 70 to 75 foot-pounds. The pinch bolt gets torqued 18 to 22 foot-pounds. After we get that on, we'll wrap this thing up with our fender and brakes. So we're gonna reinstall our front brake calipers. We're going to torque those bolts to 28 to 38 foot-pounds using that 12.10 millimeter. And then we can put our front fender on. Those bolts are going to be a 1/4 inch Allen. We're gonna torque those 16 to 20 foot-pounds. As soon as we wrap up our nacelle, we're ready to go for a test drive. Realistically, doing this in your garage, it could take you anywhere from 4 to, let's say, maybe 6 or 8 hours, depending on how fast you move as a mechanic and what your setup is, if you're working on the floor, or something like that. Either way, give yourself a Saturday afternoon and you'll still be able to take it for a test ride. If you're looking for more information on these Öhlins cartridge kits, go ahead and click that info tab on your desktop or mobile device. That'll take you to the product detail page where you can read other writer reviews and more specs about these cartridge kits. If you're still looking for more information, feel free to reach out to our customer service team. They would love to talk to you about what works best for you, your motorcycle, and your budget. I am Patrick. Thank you for watching. Now go work on those motorcycles.